Hello and welcome back to the Lightweight Pregamers, a fantasy football podcast for the Pregame HQ. As always, I'm your host, CJ Kraus. Today we have a special edition of the Lightweight Pregamers. It is the Dynasty edition, and I have two very esteemed guests with me here today. First, let's welcome from the Pregame HQ staff, Jay. How are we doing today, Jay?
I'm doing good. Doing real good. I'm glad to be back on.
Love it. I love having you on here. And of course, this is one of your best friends coming in. A great guest I want to have. First, a guest from someone else's show from the Undroppables and a contributor for Fantasy Post. Chris, how are we doing today?
Fantastic. I feel like this is a long time in the making, so it's actually here upon us. Very excited. Let's get it rolling.
Yeah, we've been planning this for like a month now, trying to organize exactly how we want to do this. And we're talking about one of my favorite things, Dynasty Fantasy Football. I have my own show called The Dynasty Duo that is with Tyler Karp. And I love bringing this idea with you today, Chris, and you today, Jay. So let's start bringing it in. But before that, let's roll this a little slower. And it's been a slow news week, but a name that's been popping up a lot is Ryan Fitzpatrick. He's gone from potentially retiring, listening to some players, turning down an offer from Denver. He's not interested in a backup role. Let's just talk about this one. Jay, I'm going to start with you. What's your opinion on all this Fitzpatrick news? Do you think he's retiring? Do you think he's coming back? And if he does come back, where's he going to end up?
Yeah, I know. Right now, I kind of think it's a little bit of a ruse on his end. I think he's trying to line up and see what's going to be the best fit for him. Obviously, he should. I mean, he's been in the league now for 16 plus years, and I think this gives him an opportunity. Like you said, he wants to be a starter, and he should be a starter. I mean, he's a very valuable asset to a team, and especially teams right now that need quarterbacks, and there sure is a bunch of them. I don't know. For me personally, I think he could add value to a couple different teams. I'd like to see, possibly, the whole idea of him being in Denver for me would be an ideal fit. I think he would be good for that young core of players they have there. I know New England's been mentioned quite a bit, but I just don't see him wanting to go to New England. I just don't think that's going to be the right fit for him at this stage in his career.
No, I totally agree. I don't think New England's the best fit for him. I would love to see him in Denver, but I don't think he wants to play that role of battling for a position. I think he wants to walk into a starting role, especially at this point in his career. I think he deserves that. Some places I would love to see him would be the Washington football team. I think they'd be a great team to have that. And potentially the Bears if they do tag Allen Robinson there. I think they would be elevating the wide receiver ones of that team with the way Fitzpatrick is. Chris, what's your opinion on all of this?
No, I was going to say Chicago. I didn't think you were going to mention them. Everybody in the Chicago area and Chicago Bears fans are, they're holding their breath for Deshaun Watson, or their fingers are crossed for Russell Wilson. They're going to wind up with Ryan Fitzpatrick. I think that's a perfect kind of, shot right at everybody who's like thinks they're dialed into free agents and all that. Ryan Fitzpatrick, let's be honest, he's a ho-hum kind of quarterback, meaning he can really deliver for our fantasy teams. We've seen it time and time again with him, and he's still got some left in the tank because he's never been that, that workhorse kind of 16-game quarterback in like an extended period of time. He'll play, 5 or 6 games this season, or he'll go on a 10-season stretch here, but he's never done like the 16-game grind back-to-back seasons or 3 seasons in a row. So Fitzpatrick has a ton left in the tank, I think, and, wherever he goes would be fantastic. And again, I'm with you. Him going to Washington would be great. Aside from the Lions, the Washington football team, I have my eyes on them. I think they've done things the right way in terms of building a defense. And again, Washington is only a year or two away in my eyes of really being a contender, being a heavyweight contender with that defense there. And Fitzpatrick might be the piece that helps them kind of bridge the gap while Gibson and Terry and their defense kind of, grow and learn together. And then bam, they'll be ready to really compete once they get a higher end quarterback.
No, I love it. The reason I keep bringing up Washington is they were the only team in the NFL to have a top 5 tight end, a top 15 running back, and a top 25 wide receiver with quarterbacks like Alex Smith and Kyle Allen throwing the ball. So that team has so much potential built into them. So that's the one thing I love that you agree with me with that one. But I want to kind of like make it a little more fun here. I know you got some things to say, Jay. What is your favorite Ryan Fitzpatrick moment, just in case he doesn't find a position, doesn't find a job?
I think my favorite moment was the Miami Raiders game where they had the face mask and he threw the bomb and they won the game there at the end there. I think that was one of the best ones for me.
Yeah. What about you, Chris? You got a moment that like sticks out to you?
Well, I mean, everybody would probably say when he showed up to the pre-game or the post-game presser wearing, teammates' gold chains and his shirt was unbuttoned here and his chest hair was hanging out. But if I'm not mistaken, what I've heard, you guys probably know by now, I like high character guys, guys that are helpful and supportive, and they show up and do their job. But what struck me as odd for Fitzpatrick when he was like emotional after they drafted Tua and after they kind of said, well, Tua is going to be our guy. I thought this was my team. It was sad. It was, like these guys are human beings. We look at them as like, racehorses or like, not human beings. I own this guy. I'm going to draft and start this guy, but they're living, breathing human beings with emotions. And I like that he was honest and, kind of showing us that he was sad. He was upset. That's not all, sunshine and rainbows. So being open like that was very cool for me.
Yeah, it definitely elevated him and some of my favorite players to like watch plays. Like, he's real, 100% real person. And like not being ever playing in a playoff game is probably huge to him. Like he wants that. That's why I think he's going to come back. I think Washington's a good fit. I think Chicago could be a good fit because those are playoff potential teams there. Love it, guys. Always starting off a high note talking about Fitzmagic there. So it's one big thing I like to bring up. So let's get to the meat and potatoes of the show, though. The thing we all came to be. We're talking Dynasty. For those of you that don't know, Dynasty Fantasy Football plays the same as Redraft in terms of scoring and things like that, but you have deeper rosters, deeper benches a lot of the time, and you own the players forever or however long the league lasts for. You have one startup draft where you draft all veterans and potentially rookie picks for that year. And each year you draft incoming rookies instead of drafting a whole new team. Think of it kind of like keeper, but you keep everybody there. So in case you've never played Dynasty, that's what we want to go into. But with all that in mind, Chris, I want to start with you because I know you got a lot to say on this topic. You're one of our experts here on this. What do you approach differently in terms of Dynasty? Well, how do you approach it different?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to say anything that's, earth shattering or profound here, but I chase youth, like if I was in a draft, I've done a ton of mock drafts already. People reach out and they say, hey, do you want to mock? Yeah, absolutely. If I got nothing going on, it's just experience, as people, what you ride the Twitter wave and it's all right now. It's, getting reps, doing broadcasts, interviewing people, getting those reps in and finding yourself and getting comfortable. And I look at mock drafting the same way. So when we get to it a month or two from now, we see everything. Nothing is a surprise. We're not panicked when we have 20 seconds left on the clock here. And given the choice, if like Zeke Elliott or Josh Jacobs is staring me in the face, I think I'd rather go Akers or Swift or for sure JT. JT's a top 5 pick right now, but I would chase that youth and the upside there. I'm not saying that Zeke Elliott doesn't have upside, but I think, and we can all agree here, we've probably seen Zeke Elliott's best season as a professional football player. So it's not bad, but I'd rather go with Akers or J-Rob or Swift. We haven't seen their full strength yet. So I'd rather draft Swift or Akers or maybe even Gibson over Zeke Elliott there. So chasing youth can get you in trouble, but you have to make the right moves. Would I draft, let's say, I don't know. Would I draft Mixon over Zeke Elliott? Probably not. Again, would I draft Swift? Or I think I would still draft Zeke over Josh Robinson. So you got to be careful. It's up to me and it's up to you. Anybody watching this, it's up to you to do the homework. Would I prefer Swift over Zeke? Would I prefer Swift or Cam Akers over Aaron Jones? Again, I look at it as, have I seen this player's best season ever? If not, is he still climbing the hill? If he is, I want him. If he's kind of, going down the hill, as they say, then I'm going to, hold off on that. And it's same thing for wide receivers. Would I rather have AJ Brown or DK Metcalf over, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans? Again, that's in the eye of the beholder. Chase youth can get you in trouble, but you need to mix in a little bit of veteran, veteran flavor depending on the league you're in.
No, that's definitely great advice there. So we're kind of minimize that. We're looking for ascending talent and fading descending talent. So players that are growing, getting better towards that age number. So a big thing with Dynasty is you're looking for a lot of players that are younger, of course, because they have more years in the league because you're owning them for a longer period of time, but also looking for those players that are at certain age numbers or carry numbers or things like that could also grow and be better. Yes, it could miss, but we're trying to play the odds here, a lot of it. And you'll see in these startup drafts that like Zeke Elliott might fall to like the 3rd round, which is like unheard of in a redraft for some of us that are new with this. And we're looking at players like the Clyde Edwards-Helaire, the James Robinson, those guys that could keep ascending up. And that might be a decision you have to make. And that depends on your team building as well. Jay, what's some things you like look for in a dynasty league, a dynasty startup?
Yeah, for me, I always take the approach that I'm always going to go early with elite running backs and wide receivers as well. And I agree with Chris. I'm going to go look for youth. But what I always kind of follow is dynasty football is like kind of building a career. You start off as a young professional, you work your way through the company, you build yourself up. You're not going to get into dynasty football and you're not going to win a championship your first year. It's just never going to happen. And unless you do, then give me your name and number because I want to be a part of what you're doing. But it's something that you build over time. And what I want to try to always do is try to, like I said, build that youth and then add in some quality veterans, sprinkle in as you're going through the draft process. And those guys can really make your team strong. And that's kind of the approach that I like to take. I always go heavy RB, heavy wide receiver, and then, usually by the 3rd round, I'm definitely looking to target my first, quarterback.
Yeah, that's assuming we're talking super flex leagues then, because we're not going quarterback that early. But most dynasty drafts are super flex in that perspective. Is that correct, Jay?
Yes, that's the definitely for super flex.
Yeah, just wanted to clarify that. I mean, we're going towards the route where most leagues are super flex, but there are some people out there that do play in the standard 1 quarterback league. So I wanted to clarify that. But yeah, definitely hitting those like young studs that have years to grow is a great way to kind of build that foundation. Because what we're really talking about is value. That's the biggest thing. We want to accumulate the most value that will not be dying on your team. And that's why you see a lot of these veterans go a little bit later in the drafts. But again, they have a purpose as well, because that's how you get wins. There's 2 rules to dynasty I like to talk about. There's winning, which is the most important factor, and then accumulating value. And that's about all I'm looking at in dynasty, realistically. And how to get there is a whole bunch of different theories, a bunch of different ways. But literally, to bare bones it, those are the 2 things that I like to say is what dynasty fantasy football is. So, Chris, do you have anything to add to that?
I just can't stress the importance of, doing some research, doing some homework. Don't be afraid to put pen to paper. Nowadays, I've been called old and a dinosaur for like 2 years now, especially, when I get on broadcasts with like younger kids. I think over the summer, I did a dynasty podcast with 2 kids one was 17 and the other one was 16. I'm in my mid 30s. They thought I was, 85 years old, the way I do my notes. Everything now is typed out. It's spreadsheets. It's Microsoft Word, whatever. There's nothing to me that beats pen and a paper. Do your homework, write some notes down, and get your process acclimated, because it's going to pay dividends when you get in a situation like we are now. Recording a broadcast, or when you get into a draft situation, you're not scrambling. You don't have 17 tabs open on your phone. You don't have all these tabs open on your computer. Your notes are boom. They're right here in front of you. I can grab them anytime I want, and I can clearly see what I was thinking when I did the notes. So I cannot stress the importance of writing notes for you personally. I'm not going to do your notes. I'm not going to do anybody else's notes. I know what I want to do, and I know my game plan. Have a plan of attack and execute it in your notes.
Yeah, that's one big thing. Always have a plan of attack, but always, again, stay water with it. Like, have a general idea. Every dynasty draft is 100% different. And I don't think Chris is saying that you have to like stick to 100% of what you wrote down, but a lot of it is having that guideline, having that roadmap of like what your end game is, and how you're going to get there, and having different paths, of course, to get there.
Look, sorry to cut you off. I've probably been in thousands upon thousands of fantasy sports drafts, baseball, hockey, and football. In the 10,000, let's say, that I've done, not a single one went according to plan. Not a single one went exactly the way I thought it was going to go. If you look at, let's say, you do a mock and you're 8th overall. Well, at 8th overall, this is the guy I want to take. It's never once happened that way, where things fall in line and I'm able to draft everybody I want. So again, as you so kindly put, have a roadmap, a general idea. Things never go according to plan, both in real life and in our fantasy lives.
Yeah, every dynasty draft is 100 different.
No, I'm sorry. interrupt. I was just going to add to what Chris was saying because I'm totally on the same page with him with this. But I always tell people always the same thing. I always say that the best part of the draft is let the draft come to you. Don't panic. A lot of these people just you see it all the time. Who should I take next at this spot? And I always respond the same way. Don't panic. Just let the draft come to you. Let the players come to you. Like you said, do your homework. Be prepared. It's so critical, and I think a lot of times it's just overlooked. It's just like everybody thinks they're going to draft this perfect team every time. It doesn't work that way. There's so many variables that come into these drafts that you just have to know and not press your team to where you're strangling the team that you're trying to build. Just let it come to you and let the players fall where they fall. And that's all you can do. It's the only thing you can control.
Yeah, the biggest thing is preparation. That's what we're talking about right now. Is making sure you have your preparation, your process are two of the biggest things to understand that. Because realistically, you're not going to get a Patrick Mahomes, Christian McCaffrey, AJ Brown team because like those players are going to be taken. You're not drafting with people that don't know fantasy football, especially in a dynasty league, but having a rough idea of like what kind of player you're looking for, what skill set you want to be putting in these pieces right there is the biggest thing, and understanding what age you're aiming for and taking a few shots when you need to. So it's the biggest, one of the biggest things I like to talk about there. So something else I want to talk about, we talk about letting the draft come to you. I love that you brought that up, but the cool thing about a dynasty startup, a lot of times they allow draft pick trading. One of my favorite aspects of a dynasty startup is being able to move around the board to hit pieces on. Something I look for is I call them blocks. Some people call them tiers, but I call blocks there's multiple players inside of them. And I try to always catch the end of each block of players that I want. Or if I see a group that is like, oh, this is a viable spot, I'll move into it and try to get two of those players and maybe forego the next block and things like that. Again, that goes with the preparation. Chris, is there anything you usually do in that mindset similar?
No, it's fantastic that you mentioned that. I do the same thing. If you see, what I'm saying is all made up, right? So let's say you're in the 4th or 5th round and there's like 10 guys that you feel you can't do without, well, 6 or 7 of them are going to be gone. But if you can hop up and trade, round 8 and 9 selections to move up to round 5 to grab that block of guys, then by all means do that. I've built some monster fantasy baseball teams doing that, and I've built some monster dynasty teams doing the same way. Me personally, I love the idea of the 12th overall, 12 team, 14 team, whatever, how many teams it is. I love the last pick of the first round because then boom, you get back-to-back picks. If it's a snake draft, it swings back to you. So in the first round, I look at it as in the first round, you get 2 picks. You get the last 2 picks of the first round. And in my case, I feel like I'm able to kind of slow down the draft. I'm able to cause enough melee, if let's say at the end of the first round, in a super flex league, I just did it today. Everybody's taking a quarterback in the first round in pick 12, and then round 2, pick 1, I went running back, and then in the start of the second round, you go on a running back kind of a running back run. Same thing when I get back to my 3rd and 4th round. I feel like I can control the draft having back-to-back picks, no matter, the size of the league, no matter what the rules are, PPR, non-PPR. I love the idea of personally feeling like I'm in control of the draft. I let it come to me, as you said, and then I can control the flow of the draft.
This is a great advanced tactic that you can use if you're ever on the corners, because you're in control of the next run, because you're the one that can start it, because you get the back-to-backs, one thing. Correct. So that's one thing Chris brings up that I really love that he did. So like a lot of people don't like the corner for that reason, but I don't care what spot I am, honestly, because they each have a different strategy to me. And the corner strategy, because you're waiting so long typically, or you have to overpay to move because your picks are so vastly different, you want to be able to be like, okay, well, I need to take quarterback here because a lot of teams don't have them. I need them to start taking them. So something falls back to me. And understanding that control of the board that you can only get at the corners. So it's a beautiful way of putting it.
Or one thing I've noticed is if I'm picking at the end of every round and then the first pick of the following round, I'm able to pick up some scraps, if that makes any sense. So yeah. If I'm sitting and I'm watching the draft happen, knowing I get the last pick of this round and then the first pick of the following round, the group chat's going nuts. your texts are going nuts. And I'm just looking at it from a fly on the wall, although I'm in the draft and saying, oh my God, I can't believe nobody's mentioned, JD McKissick. I'm in the 5th, 6th round, so maybe even the 8th or 10th round. Nobody's talking about JD McKissick. Everybody's worried about a quarterback right now. I'm able to pick up the scraps and able to pick up, the fall risers and fallers of each round, not the entire draft. Everybody is too focused on, what's the best value that someone got in this draft, or who reached too much in this draft. What about doing the same thing at the end of every round? That's why I love picking at the last pick of each round and the first at the other one. I'm able to really see where people are missing and pick up them scraps if it's feasible for my team.
Yeah, you see the full board of those corners. That's a beautiful way to put that. Jay, is there anything you like to do during a startup?
Yeah, I'm with Chris as far as, if you're in that 10 through 12 spot, you're in a good place to really get good value down there. But one of the things I'm always kind of looking backwards as well and seeing as these guys are picking, I'm looking at, that's where the preparation comes in, is knowing players, knowing where they're sitting in the draft and being ready to be able to pull the trigger on guys a little later and a little further down, because everyone's always so focused on, let's get all the best guys at the top. Everyone forgets about all the quality stuff as you get further into the draft. And I always really preach that, look for those guys a little later down that can add tremendous value and create balance for your teams. I'm a big believer in having good balance on teams. That to me, it's really important. And everybody wants youth. I believe in that as well. I think you got to have veteran guys in there, especially guys that are on rosters that are going to come up and make a contribution to a team at any given time, and it's when they go off, like the JD McKissicks.
Yeah, understanding that the draft isn't won in the first few rounds because everybody's going to have good players there. Period. That's why they're drafted so highly. The draft in the leagues are won in those later rounds, those 8 to 12 round, even deeper. Absolutely. Sometimes at 14 to 16, grabbing the right guys that could give you the right sparks you need, or grabbing the guys that just have the upside to hit. I remember last year, I was the guy drafting Robert Tonyan and Logan Thomas around 15 and 17, every single startup I had. And those guys are beautiful players. It's not always going to work that way, but that's what gave me the edge to get a couple extra wins in some of my dynasties, and that's great to have that. So again, good at homework is the biggest thing there. Talking about team building, I love that we're able to segue in this one very well. I know Chris has some great ideas on this one. How do we like to build our teams? Let's say we're in the startup, we have an idea. What are we creating our roadmap to look like?
Well, there's I've found out over the years, over the last 10 or 15 years, there are hundreds. Some of them are very well known. Some of them people don't even want to talk about. And then the other ones, you get made fun of for, or you're a truther, or zero RB, you get made fun of, or you use it to your advantage. Same thing with zero wide receiver, whatever, odd stance you have, own it and run with it. But what the one that I've found most recently, there's many, but the one that I'm, digging on the most is building around a very young, studly kind of wide receiver. Like an AJ Brown, DK Metcalf, Justin Jefferson, yep. CeeDee Lamb. Build a core, draft your first 3 or 4 picks. Just grab these unbelievably talented young stud wide receivers, and then just punt on running back. And then but people aren't patient like that. They don't see the big picture here. So let's say you draft, AJ Brown, CeeDee Lamb, DK Metcalf, if that's possible. And then the season starts. Draft is over. Your season starts. You see what you have, what you can do, and then when needed, you make the selections for running backs to implement in your team to make a push if need be. Are you trying to, if it's a startup, let's say, so you don't want to tank right off the bat for a higher pick, but everything is pretty well even in a startup leading into the season. And it's when we get after week 8 and 9 where you can kind of see where your team is headed, not only for this season, but in the future. So, playoff pushes, that's when you sell off your draft selections. That's when you sell off your kind of fringe guys. Do you have a guy who's, super hot at the time, like Logan Thomas was last year, Robert Tonyan? You sell these guys off for for equity in the playoffs for stud running backs like a Zeke, who was going for, I mean, his value was never lower than it was last season. You could acquire James Robinson halfway through the season. So right as it stands right now, I got all these notes and ideas in my head because I've seen everybody talking about the young wide receiver advantage, and then you add, stud running backs when needed, if that makes sense.
No, 100% makes sense. That's the thing. You want to build around the wide receiver, and running back is one of the most replaceable positions in the NFL. So that means there's a lot of turnover there. So investing too highly into them and with too many of them, you're setting your team to be very fragile in the long term there. So it's a beautiful way. Like, I want to bring up a startup I did now that you talked about that. I didn't take a running back till round 8 in this startup, and it was A.J. Dillon. I have Devontae Adams, Calvin Ridley, A.J. Brown, Amari Cooper as my core of wide receivers there. So I'm very happy with that. And I love building around that with guys like Curtis Samuel and Mark Andrews, tight end premium, things like that. So I have a great core there, and I'm happy with that. I can trade for, let's say, this year's Jeff Wilson somewhere in the middle of the season. It cost me almost nothing. And that's a great strategy, especially in that startup. Nobody was doing it. They were I got Amari Cooper in the 6th, Calvin Ridley in the 5th. I'm like, I'm not going to pull the trigger on somebody with a short shelf life when I have all these available assets, and I can go buy that shelf life later on. Again, that's a beautiful way to put it. What's up?
I was just going to say, and I mean, interrupt, but you essentially got the starter, in A.J. Dillon. I mean, that's right there is tremendous value in the 8th round. And that's the whole point, is waiting for that opportunity.
Yeah, and I'm nowhere near a truther that has to be it had to be 0 RB in that draft. It's just the way it felt to me looking at value. I don't think those extreme strategies work out well unless you're the one doing the zag. If everyone's doing heavy RB, go 0 RB. If everyone's doing heavy wide receiver, go 0 wide receivers. The value's there. But that's the way you want to approach it there. So, but I think the best thing you can do is have a core of wide receivers. They have the longest play life, and they don't go down in value, and they're the least ability to be replaced.
So fast. They don't just jump off a cliff like Todd Gurley.
Yeah.
I mean, that I can't, in all my years, I can't remember seeing a fall from grace so nasty, so fast than with Todd Gurley. And that was that whole Iron Bank idea we were throwing around before we started the broadcast.
Well, now that you brought it up, let's talk about that Iron Bank. I love the idea there, and then we'll look at Jay's opinion on it after this. But I love the idea of it. I've never heard it used in that term, but I want to hear you describe this one, Chris. What is the Iron Bank?
Sure. I have my notes in front of me because I've kind of brought it up to several people, several well-trusted people around me. And, I just joined, not trying to promo anything, but I just joined the Undroppables, and those guys there's some unbelievably sharp fantasy minds over there. So the idea behind the Iron Bank is you use your draft selections, any draft, higher end draft selections, 1st round, 2nd rounds, and you put them in the Iron Bank. We'll do Iron Bank.
These are rookie picks we're talking about, correct?
Yeah, rookie picks. Yeah, you put those in the bank, but you use them, but you don't start with them. So let's say you have, you take over an orphan team. This idea, fits perfect with an orphan team. You got a couple pieces, as we were saying, Zeke Elliott, Todd Gurley, Chris Carson. During the season, you trade those players away to a competing team, to a team that's making a playoff push, or to a team that's looking to go for it all. And you trade these players away in mid-season, right before the fantasy playoffs. 1st, 2nd round selections, you put them in your Iron Bank because, as you know, 1st and 2nd round draft selections, they don't depreciate. They still hold value. At the bottom level, they hold the value exactly what they are, 1st or 2nd round selections. They might appreciate in value, but they will never depreciate. Not like those players, not like Zeke, not like Chris Carson, not like Todd Gurley. Once they go, you're left holding your hat and you got nothing to show for it. So if you can, that's a good way to turn over and replenish your team, if that makes sense. Are we following?
Oh, no, 100%. We're talking about if your team, let's say you didn't make the playoffs, you had a bad year. Last year you had Dak and Kittle, and they got hurt, and your team went downhill fast there. You don't want to be holding on to these assets that are going to depreciate. You know where you can't get injured, though? Rookie picks.
No.
That's the biggest thing. Then they're never going to be worth more than right before the draft, but they're always going to be easier to grab the farther away from the draft that is. So using that strategy at the end of a season, like say your team's out of it and you're trying to plan for next year, definitely don't be afraid to sell those higher end, older assets for those rookie picks to get that bankroll. And one thing I want to kind of build off that as well is something I did in this recently startup that I did this year. It's a different one than we talked about. I have 10 22 firsts. That is my bank that I'm sitting on now because they're worth the least amount so far out for next year. Everyone's like, oh, everyone thinks they're the best team in the world right now. You know what's going to happen? It's a 14-team league. 8 of them are not going to make the playoffs. Guaranteed. That's only 6 make the playoffs. And now they don't have their first to back off of and to build off of there. So I grabbed young youth players and bankrolled my 10 22 firsts. And that's what I like to do in the startup as well. Try to accumulate extra firsts because most of the time people will value them so much lower than their actual worth because they're so far away and people will get overconfident. So don't overtrade for them, but definitely find that good value in those firsts, whether it be selling off some high-end players to accumulate more or moving back in a startup to grab extra ones to set that bankroll because it does 2 things in that situation. You're now the buyer if you're a winning team because now you can buy from those teams that need the bankroll. Correct. Or you're the one that has the bank ready to come back the next season. Jay, what do you think of all these ideas we're throwing out here?
No, I think it's excellent strategy across the board. I mean, you're in a better position when you're holding than you got nothing in your hand and you got an old team that, you're not going anywhere with. And I think it's a great philosophy and a great way to basically build, a team for the future. That because essentially, I mean, that's what this is all about. It's about building for the future.
Yeah, the key to Dynasty is not about winning just once. It's about winning multiple
times. Yeah.
Yeah. So like anybody can win once a lot of the time, but we're trying to like build teams that are like always in the hunt.
The best part of this whole thing is, as we were saying, pull back the curtain a little bit. What we were talking about before you started the broadcast here is, everybody can get, have 2 or 3 really good players on their team, but the rest of your team stinks. When you have such equity in the Iron Bank with the selections, you're able to cash that in whatever draft that you want. Essentially, if you're active and you're able to move, picks around for next year or the following year, you're able to pick your spots because then you're able to draft a ton of kids and they all come up and they all kind of break out at the same time. Who wants, 1 or 2 first round picks, a year and one kid hits and one kid doesn't. So you're left with a stud and you're left with a dud. You wasted 1 pick and 1 pick's good. And then you keep doing the same thing. So your team is always left in purgatory in a way where you're not very good, but you're not bad. You're just kind of staying in that 500, that even range, 8 and 8 all the time, or, like that. So when you able to, it's just an odds game. If I have it, like you said, if you have 10 first round selections, worst case scenario, 5 or 6 of those hit and you still have a loaded roster. So it's just all about depositing and withdrawing from the Iron Bank, but with draft selections and selling off guys that are not, that you don't think are important, that are not actually important for your long-term, strategy, but they may be important to someone else right here and now.
Yeah. You never want to tread water in Dynasty. That's the worst thing you could be, is always be in that awful, barely making the playoffs and then get busted out in the first round, or worse, being the one team on the odd man out. And you're 2 to 3 players away, but you're like, don't want to either blow it up or go by if you don't have the equity. So this is a way to kind of have that safety net, but also give yourself opportunity to be more aggressive on those high variance players, the ones that could break out.
You're in neutral. You have Jonathan Taylor in Indianapolis, but then you don't know what to do, so you swap him out for DeAndre Swift. It's like a lateral move. You're just in neutral, spinning your wheels.
Yeah, we always want to be ascending. Like you in Dynasty, you want to be the first place team, or like be in that top 3 that's battling for it, or you want to be in that bottom of it. And it's weird to say that from a lot of people's perspective, but when you're losing, you can be winning if you set yourself up right, because you're setting yourself up for multiple years in the future. That's one big thing about that's the fun of Dynasty too, is you're never done with all of that. So thinking of all that value we're talking about, one thing I want to say is what's undervalued players we're targeting this season for Dynasty that we can send our listeners off with. Chris, let's start with you, man.
Sure. To me, it's pretty, I mean, there's so many, it's again, it's in the eye, the beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? Our dynasty rosters are in the eye of the beholder, and we're the beholder of the team. The one guy, kid actually, who's being undervalued right now is scary Terry McLaurin in Washington. I have, his ADP in front of me, and he looks like, from Fantasy Football Calculator, full point PPR, he's going around 37.4 overall. So you're looking like late, let's just call it what it is. It's like the beginning of the fourth round, end of the third round. And this kid, I think he can return massive value on our dynasty teams. Nobody's talking about him because everybody is so in love. Everybody's so enamored with the rookie class of this year, and everybody's so enamored with last year's rookie class, and rightfully so. Last year's class was amazing. This year's class is good. I mean, we only know so much. We haven't seen pro days. We haven't seen 40 times, all of them yet. We haven't seen preseason. We don't even know where these current rookies are being drafted to. And meanwhile, Terry McLaurin is getting passed up for, Javonte Williams, Kenny Gainwell, what I've seen. I mean, whatever. I mean, we don't know what these kids will be, what these guys will be, but Terry McLaurin looks to be, in all intents and purposes, matchup proof. How many quarterbacks did he play with last season in Washington? And he was still able to maintain a very respectable PPR floor, 10, 12 points week in and week out. Dare I say, Terry McLaurin was kind of matchup proof last season, a set it and forget it kind of kid. And in the in crowd of dynasty, the who's who of dynasty minds, he's still a top 10 dynasty wide receiver. And yet in almost every mock draft I'm doing, almost every dynasty conversation I'm having on social media, his name isn't even mentioned. So I find, again, like this is a game show. Like, yes, Terry McLaurin is being undervalued.
100%. You can't say more nice thing of Terry McLaurin. Like, I have my wide receiver 9 in my dynasty rankings. In that 10 rookie team, the 10 2021 team, he is my wide receiver 1. So you're naming all the things. Again, I brought it up earlier that he is one of the only, that Washington was the only team to have a top 5 tight end, a top 15 running back, and a top 24 wide receiver. The top 24 wide receiver was Terry McLaurin, averaging 15.2 PPR points per game, with players like Kyle Allen and Alex Smith throwing the ball, not getting as many targets. Yeah. These players that arguably aren't in the top 32 quarterbacks in the NFL. So I love that you brought him up. And he goes around that late 4th, early 5th round. To get a wide receiver 1 that late is criminal. It's stealing there. So,
and there's nothing we can say that's going to change his ADP. There's
nothing, only go up.
Yeah, there's nothing I can do or say to make, him be bumped up into the end of the second or in the beginning of the third round. So in turn, we have to adapt. If you see that coming, again, if you prepared and you take notes, you're able to see that's where Terry is going. And if you're in the know and if you're prepared, you just lie and wait. If you're able to trade up or pre-draft, get that, late third round draft pick for next to nothing next season or 2023, do that in full mindfulness that you're going to use that selection for Scary Terry.
100%. Love that choice right there. I'm going to bring up mine next. It's Tyler Boyd. Someone that's very undervalued inside of the community. It's a little – did I steal yours, Jay?
Yeah.
Sorry about that, man.
You're good, man. Go with it. No, go with it. You're good.
I love Tyler Boyd. I love T.
too.
Higgins. T. Higgins is the alpha of that team. I'm not going to argue that. But we're talking about a guy that was wide receiver 11 when Joe Burrow was the quarterback. He did fall off a cliff a little bit whenever we saw other quarterbacks. We're talking about guys like Brandon Allen, guys that should, he's not the sexiest pick, but your team doesn't have to be all sexy to be a winner. Like, you can have championship teams that started Jamison Crowder last year, things like that, because you need full depth there as well because players get hurt. And Tyler Boyd's being criminal undervalued. He's going around ADP in a Superflex league around round 9 to 10. I've seen him as late as round 11. That is a criminal undervalue of a player that could be your wide receiver 2 on a team and have wide receiver 1 weeks. What are your guys' opinion on that? And Jay, I kind of stole that from you, so I'll let you talk about Tyler Boyd and Terry McLaurin real quick.
No, I agree with both of you guys. I mean, they're both players that are, like you said, they're criminally undervalued. And I think there's so much value in both of those guys. And if you look at what they do every week, it'll just show you that, hey, these are guys that are producing at a high level every week. And they're doing it with essentially, last year, Boyd did it with essentially no quarterback throughout the season, and McLaurin's done it his whole career with nobody there. I mean, just a bunch of scrubs week in and week out. So if you're looking for value, those are the type of guys to get. But I was going to interject one other guy too, and I'm going to go with DJ Moore. He's another guy that I think he should, if they can get it put together in the quarterback spot, I think he's another guy that's being a little bit undervalued right now, just because of what he's done. I mean, the guy's consistently had good seasons with, pretty marginal quarterback play as well. And I think if you're looking for value, there's another guy to add to that list as well.
Yeah, one big thing I think we're talking about is if you're looking for value on players, look for the players that have at least moderate to high level production without a quarterback, because now we've seen their floor and it can only go up from there. And those are guys that I love to target. I love that you brought up DJ Moore. He goes around that same range of the Terry McLaurin in drafts, sometimes sooner, sometimes later, but he's around that 4th to 5th level. He has been seeing kind of a spike lately because of all the talk of maybe Deshaun Watson going to Carolina, and that's a whole nother speculation story there. But no, I love DJ Moore as a player. I think he's only going to have more targets there with Curtis Samuel most likely moving on. What's your opinion on Boyd and Moore there, Chris?
Oh, Boyd he's always been phenomenal. Someone that nobody really cares about, which is great for guys like us who, we see something and we go out and we get it for next to nothing. Tyler Boyd could be had for 3rd round draft selection, in the coming seasons. The craziest one I've seen is 310. So round 3, pick 10, and like a 4th round, 5th rounder for Tyler Boyd in season for this year.
Rookie picks there. We're talking
for this, for this year's rookie pick. It's insane. And in draft, I think last year I saw that in a startup where it was like a couple people, knew what they were doing and the rest didn't. It was between 2 teams that had no idea what they were doing. And Tyler Boyd went for, I believe, 1-8 overall in a startup, which is insane to me. 1-8, and this was right after they drafted. This was before that. So 2 or 3 seasons ago. And when it comes to, he's just a PPR machine, and he's going to be, I'm with you. T. Higgins is going to be the alpha there. Again, talk about another kid who's matchup proof. What did he do? Six or more receptions and 60 or more yards, I believe, in 7 or 8 games last season with and without Joe Burrow. The only reason I know that is because I have him on a dynasty team. And when we get to DJ Moore, another kid who I personally look at in the same vein as A.J. Brown. I mean, those two will permanently be connected to me. They're in the same draft class. They went to, 2 teams that are like blue and silver kind of in a way that aren't the Lions. And, DJ Moore, he can do it. He just needs that little oomph. He needs that push, and he's going to be okay. And if you look at, I guess I said that both are in kind of the same vein. A.J. Brown right now is, by all purposes, he's some people's number 1 dynasty wide receiver. DJ Moore will get there, and I think this season he's going to show us what he's made of because, as we know, Carolina they've kind of tossed out Teddy Bridgewater without tossing him out. Teddy Bridgewater's still there, coming to practice or hanging out at the facility, and it's kind of a bummer for him. It's embarrassing, and it's like he doesn't even see what they're trying to do, or he doesn't see that. DJ Moore will take a massive step this season, and you can get him in 5th, 6th round this year, and that's on the early end. I've seen him go 7th, 8th round, and nobody's even paying attention to it. Go out and get DJ Moore. Yeah,
definitely 3 guys you should be buying, and definitely 3 guys you should be targeting out there. But one thing I want to bring up, we had some breaking news happen while we're recording here, and I'm not sure if you guys saw it, but it came across my line. It's Dak Prescott signed a long-term deal. They haven't gotten details about it with the Dallas Cowboys, so they finally got it done. I personally thought this was going to happen because the way the cap situation went down, it didn't help them to sign him for a franchise tag this year. It helped them to get that long-term deal done. Again, we don't know details yet. This just happened. What is your instant reaction, Chris?
Oh, it's fantastic for CD Lamb. It's fantastic for can you even call it a reemergence for Zeke Elliott? He never really went away. He had a couple bad games, but that's what I've said. That's what everybody else has said. Don't sell Zeke Elliott for, pennies on the dollar, because when Dak Prescott is the quarterback, he's unbelievably good and he's unbelievably talented. So this is good news for Michael Gallup as well. It's just good news in general for their offense. If you notice last season, season when he went down with that gruesome ankle injury at home against the Giants, I believe they were playing, that offense wasn't the same for the rest of the season. In large in part, I think, Zeke Elliott was just kind of, he was bummed out. Dak Prescott and him are like best friends. They're like brothers. They've grown into a special relationship. And so now that whole organization is going to be, re-energized. They're going to, to enter, the preseason or the draft with this new fire. So this is great for Dallas. Does it matter in the East? No, I think Washington runs away with that division for several seasons in a row here. Maybe not this year, but as I said, they're 1 or 2 years away. But this is good for overall for, selfishly for our fantasy teams and even the Dallas Cowboys fans who no love lost.
Yeah, I bet. But yeah, it's definitely great news for everyone on that team and the offense side ball. Like the offense had a Danucci problem last year, is what I like to call it. And the guys like Andy Dalton, who was fine, but those offensive pieces deserved better. I like to say I love Amari Cooper, one of my favorite players out there. We were robbed of a top 5 wide receiver season last year because he was doing that with Dak. So maybe we get that this year, and ascending talents like CeeDee Lamb only went up in value in the past 10 seconds. That's the thing about Dynasty. Players can change value anytime.
In the drop of a hat.
Yeah.
Drop of a hat.
In the middle of one recording. But Jay, what's your instant reaction, man?
No, I think it's awesome. I just, like you said, the value of all these guys just goes up. I mean, you hit on them both. I mean, I'm a big Amari Cooper guy as well, and he's another guy that just gets overlooked every single year, like he doesn't matter. And I mean, people are missing the boat on how good he really is. And Michael Gallup. I mean, I'm a real big Michael Gallup guy, and I mean, this just absolutely is outstanding for Michael Gallup's value going forward.
Yeah, no, Dak is one of my favorite quarterbacks to watch and my favorite for fantasy as well. So before we get out of here, one last thing I want to say. Where do you rank Dak now in your Dynasty fantasy football rankings? Chris, what rank is he to you?
Oh, wow. Let's I'll just talk it out, live on the air with you. So, you got Patrick Mahomes 1, Josh Allen is 2, Kyler Murray is 3. Do you put? I sure wouldn't put Lamar Jackson over Dak. So looks to me like he's top 4. He's top 5 for sure. Specifically, probably top 4. I mean, you can't go wrong with Patty Mahomes, Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, and then Dak Prescott.
So he's your quarterback 4. Love it right there. So Jay, where would you put him in your Dynasty quarterback rankings?
Yeah, he's actually 4 on my list too, and I was just looking at him, and Chris was naming him off as we go, but yeah, he's 4 for me as well. Absolutely,
love it,
without a doubt.
Yeah. So yeah, same top 4 as him with the Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, and
actually, if I could not take it back, but I think I would put him right at 5. I think I'd prefer Deshaun Watson. Yeah,
that's what I was wondering where Watson was going to end up in that situation, but no, I mean, I am really high on Dak. He is my quarterback 3. Now, I was waiting for that. I know some other people have him a little bit higher. My co-host on the Dynasty Duo now has him at quarterback 2 because all he was waiting on was a long-term deal because he told me that beforehand. So shout out to Tyler DLF Carp. But I have him at quarterback 3. I'm a huge Dak truther. I think his weapons, I think his weapons elevate him to that point that I don't think Kyler has yet. But I could definitely see he's in that tier of 5. Which is going to be Patrick Mahomes is my tier 1. Nothing's going to touch that one. But then you can fluctuate Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, Dak Prescott, and Deshaun Watson in the same vein in that little range. And I think Lamar's just on the outside looking in my opinion. And
again, if we take what you said earlier in the broadcast about a draft never going the way we want, if you have a general idea, as you said, have a tier, if I'm in that area, I'd be happy with either one of those after Patrick Mahomes, that second tier of 4 or 5 guys. If I miss out on 3 of them, there's still 2 out of the 5 I'd be happy with.
Love it. I love that you tied a little bow on that one. That's what we have to think about it. Like we're not always going to get our guys, but you always want to get the block that you want is the goal of each one. But guys, thank you so much for joining me. I'm gonna let you guys plug your stuff. So Jay, where can we find you? What are you working on?
Yeah, so you can find me at jray_boyce. I'm doing work obviously with Pregame HQ over at doing stuff with Fighting Chance. We're doing MLB content with those guys as well as some NFL stuff as well. So look for stuff coming out here in the near future. And it was nice to be on with you guys both today, and good to have my boy Chris on here. So
yeah, I love it. You guys have both been a pleasure for today. I love talking Dynasty. I love talking to you guys. Like, great minds in the fantasy community. I love bringing us all together there. And definitely check out his work, whether you're looking at NFL or MLB there. But Chris, I know you got a ton of stuff going on, so plug all the stuff you got going on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm here to hang out and, chop it up with you guys. If you want to find me, I'm at Detroit Beastie. I pride myself in getting back to everybody who tags me or questions me. And for all the other stuff I got going on, you'll find it when it comes out. Don't want to bog down the conversation here. The one thing I do want to say is I'm very scared to end the broadcast and then go on Twitter. It's going to be insane about this Dak Prescott news. There's going to be fights about rankings of Michael Gallup, and I can already see it now. How many times after we end this broadcast are we going to go on Twitter? It's going to be like, the window to buy Michael Gallup has closed. It's just going to be insane on Twitter about Gallup and Cooper. And, get your vests on and get in there and be kind to people.
I've put my seatbelt on already to get ready for this, because it's probably happening right now. So the second we end this broadcast, it's going to be going on. But again, make sure you check him out at Detroit Beastie there and JRay_Boyce. I am at KidFlashFF. You can find me there. I'm here every single week hosting the Pregame HQ podcast. I also host the Dynasty Duo FF podcast with my boy Tyler Karp. You can find me at Wrestling Mat 1. I'm the luchador over there. I got a lot of stuff going on. But guys, thank you so much for coming in. Thank you for joining me. Check out their stuff. Give them a follow, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
Bye.
Thanks.